William, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So, can you give myself and the audience a little bit about your background and how you got to where you're at now?
Well, I've been employed by the Virginia Department of State Police since 1986. That's a long time ago. Started out, went through the academy and worked in the road as a uniformed trooper. Did that for 13 years. During that time, I was certified as a accident reconstruction expert, and also had a explosive canine. I was in that for 5 years. Got promoted to agent, worked narcotics for a little over a year and a half, and then a position came available in the insurance fraud unit, and I took that and been working insurance fraud cases since 2000.
So, was there something in particular about insurance fraud that caught your attention?
Well, it has started because we started the program back at the end of 1988. It became effective in January of 1999, and it was something brand new. We typically work the normal murder, rapes, and robberies, and drugs, and white collar crimes, but this is a little bit different type of investigation, and it kind of piqued my interest. But truth be told, when I was working narcotics, I was away from where I lived, and a position came available back where I was living at the time. So I applied for that and took the position. But I've enjoyed it ever since. I've been in it 22 years.
Being around friends and family is definitely a good motivator for a job.
Oh, yeah.
So, is there any particular case that kind of stands out to you as the most interesting or unusual insurance fraud case that you've come across?
Well, let's see. I got a list. I got a bunch of them. I just finished one up. It was kind of a twist because it's nothing that I'd worked in the previous 20 years. And I just finished up with it last year. A funeral home, a guy that owned a funeral home local to where I live now, was offering prepaid insurance for funeral expenses.
Hmm.
He got into some financial difficulties. So what he was doing, what we discovered is he was taking people's premiums and basically putting it in his pocket and not binding the coverage. So the people thought they had a valid policy to pay for their funeral, and all of my victims were pretty elderly.
Hmm.
In fact, three of them died during the time I was working the investigation and getting all the documents and everything. And that was to the tune of 50, a little over $50,000 in premiums that he took and didn't bind any covers. And people
Oh.
had no insurance whatsoever for their funerals. He just got sentenced at the end of last year to 10 years. Most of it was spent. He's got to pull 2 years in the penitentiary. But the sad thing is the people are not going to get their money back on that. They're kind of, and I actually found some other victims that he had done the same thing too, but they didn't want to proceed because they knew they weren't going to get their money back, and
Hmm.
just kind of didn't want to go through the rigors of that.
So I guess the two questions I have is, how did he get found out that he was committing the fraud, and then what is there something that the people could have done, kind of in the beginning or during the process, to realize that maybe he was doing this?
Well, it actually came about by the death of one of my victims' sons. And that was another story that he had taken the body to the funeral home and just kind of shoved it in the back corner. And that was a whole other, and he got charged criminally for that as well. But then they got to checking through their insurance policy to see if there's anything on the son. And that's when they found out that his mother, who was in her 90s, she had paid, I think, $10,000 or $11,000, but she had no coverage at all.
Oh.
Yeah. But I would suggest, and it's one of my things that I tell people when talking about insurance, on a regular basis, just call and check the insurance company if you can do it online or whatever. But always check and make sure your policy is still in effect.
Hmm.
Um,
were the victims making payments to him and then he was supposed to make it to the insurance company, or was he kind of intercepting payments made out to the insurance company?
No, he was taking the money. And in Virginia, you could do that insurance. And like I said, I didn't know this because I had never dealt with insurance, with funeral home insurance.
Yeah.
But funeral directors can be appointed as kind of quasi agents for this specific purpose. And so what he was doing was actually filling out the application, sitting down with people and going over everything and filling out the application and give them a copy of that. But then he was kind of stonewalling on the actual policy paperwork coming to him. All of my victims, except for one, paid all the money in a lump sum.
Gotcha.
Yeah, one of them had put a down payment, and they were going to make payments. This came to light, so they only lost $700. But my other victims averaged right around $10,000 a piece, and they paid it all in a lump sum. So they're just out of that money.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate when people take advantage of people at a particular time of pain and grief, when it's the last thing you want to be dealing with is you're trying to bury a loved one and finding out the insurance is a scam, the burial guy is quasi legit himself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole purpose of getting this coverage, right?
Yeah.
So you don't lessen the burden of your family, at that time. And it was particularly heinous, I think, that he took advantage of these elderly people the way he did.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think probably in my mind the most common insurance scam that I can think of for most people that they have the chance to be exposed to is kind of staged auto accidents.
Yeah, that's kind of the prevalent fraud scheme that we find. Anything involving staged accidents, staged auto thefts, and burning of the vehicles. Typically, and we've investigated a few where there were like organized rings, not really organized crime that we've seen in Virginia yet, but organized rings doing multiple staged accidents. One case that I prosecuted a few years ago was one lady, and she had a horrific criminal history, horrific claims history. I mean, it was like page upon page upon page of claims. And so what she was doing, she had a core group of her older son and a friend of his, and she had smaller children and nephews and nieces. And so what she was doing was staging accidents and actually running cars together, staging an accident, staying off to the side, and then when after the accident, put the kids in,
oh wow,
and claim that everybody was injured. And who's going to question a 3 or 4, 5-year-old whether they're injured? If the mom says they're hurt, they're hurt. And so, but she just did that just continually, and I had just reams and reams of paperwork and documents to go through. I charged her federally, went through the federal system, charged her with actually healthcare fraud when it deals with injuries arising out of an auto accident. Mm-hmm. So I convicted her of 7 counts. The funny thing about this one, she got convicted of 7 counts of healthcare fraud, and she got sentenced to 84 months in federal prison. And not only was it bad enough that she was staging an accident, but she was actually altering and fabricating medical bills.
Oh wow!
That she submitted, to the insurance companies, on top of that. So it wasn't bad enough that she was claiming a false accident. She was trying to inflate it even more, with the fraudulent documents. She also filed in one of the accidents, one of the bigger ones. She got paid, I think it was like $41,000 out of the one accident, and she actually filed suit and filed a homeowner's claim saying that a bunch of items were stolen out of her car when it was towed to the tow yard. She submitted a 42-page proof of loss.
Oh wow!
Of all the items, it was like over 400 items.
That's a lot of stuff to put in a car.
And it was a mid-sized car. It was a Isuzu something or other. But she had 5 people in the car with her, with all those items. So when it came time to the federal trial, I wanted to take that proof of loss and go to Walmart and take all that stuff she had listed on there and see if it was physically possible to put all that stuff in there, let alone 5 people in there with it. U.S. attorney looked at me like I was an idiot, but but that was $11,000 in addition to all that, she on top of the 41,000 that she had already gotten that she attempted to get. And so we were able to use that as a mitigating factor when she was sentenced. So, and that knocked it up to the next threshold level. But she was just a career criminal. And that's kind of people I kind of look to prosecute.
Mm-hmm.
We get some claims. There's good people that do good things and bad people that do bad things. And then there's good people that do stupid things. And, and I kind of gear my investigations toward the bad people that do intentional things, when they're perpetrating this crime.
Yeah, it's one thing when someone says they had a better radio in the car than they really had versus someone who's causing accidents.
Right. And, and some people, I had one guy in particular, he had a race car that he had wrecked, and he was doing time trials. He wasn't like on an oval driving. It was, you go to the track and you compete against the clock. And on the way home, he wrecked it. And, well, he wrecked it at the racetrack, but he said he was on his way home when he wrecked it. And so it wasn't covered because it was a racing event. But, his thing was, I paid all these premiums and I thought that, trying to get my money back a little bit. And I, you kind of see that in a way. Yeah. It's, insurance is not a savings account. It provides a service, but I kind of, understood where he was coming from. Didn't agree with it, but understood. And his big thing is he said, I'll take whatever punishment you give me. I just don't want to convict it of a felony because I still want to vote. So that's kind of how that ended up.
So with the staged accidents, if I'm driving down the road and someone stages an accident, what are the sort of things that they're doing to stage the accident to make it look like it's my fault?
Well,
or is that what's happening?
Yeah, most of the time if we have staged accidents that are insurance fraud, there's usually people that are complicit that are working together, at least here in Virginia. Mm-hmm. Now, I know years ago, there was this big thing, and I think it was out in California, where they called the swooping squad, where, again, 2 people working in tandem, but they would pick a car and pull in front of them and just slam on brakes and then have the co-conspirator next to, so the person behind them wouldn't be able to avoid and ran into them. And, of course, they claimed the neck and back injury and all that and pumped up the medical bills. So we haven't seen that here in Virginia. Most of the times it's people that are colluding together, they're working together and staging wrecks.
Is it the same sort of thing you see with insurance fraud against businesses, kind of the slip and fall, or is it the business owners conducting the scam?
No, we haven't seen too much with business owners. We've had a few slip and falls, and they're hard to prove. Soft tissue injury is kind of hard to prove or disprove, if you will. We did have a guy a few years ago. His name had come across our desk, and he had 13 previous slip and falls. And we had looked at it and just didn't have any way to convict him. And we actually, on this last case, we finally did convict him on. We didn't disprove the injury or the slip and fall itself, but he had, again, got a little greedy and had filed for wage loss. So we were able to prove, actually went undercover and posed as an insurance adjuster for the insurance company that covered the building, not the business, but the building itself, to see if there was exposure there. Got him to talk a little bit, and we determined that the business that he claimed he's lost wages from never existed. So we were able to convict him on that aspect of it. Oddly enough, right after that, he moved to Tampa, and then we got contacted by them down there. He had done a slip and fall within 6 months, moving to Florida.
It sounds like his real job is slipping around a lot.
Yeah, not a very agile person.
Yeah,
But
I
they're the
would,
kind of people we want to prosecute. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what we look for.
that they've made a career out of it as opposed to as opposed to a single incident.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Are they are these people like targeting specific types of businesses? I know, like out here in California, there was a rash of people targeting kind of like immigrant businesses, people who may not be more as familiar with the law. They're basically saying, "Hey, this happened at your restaurant or your business. We're going to sue you, but we'll settle for a couple $1,000s and we'll go away."
Right.
Is
Right.
the sort of thing where they're targeting immigrant communities?
Not that we've seen anything in particular. It's just, it's kind of like a crime of opportunity.
Hmm.
So mostly with the slip and falls, they're convenience stores where they have those little tanks of soft drinks where they'll have ice and drinks and whatever, and those typically always leak.
Hmm.
So they'll look for something like that. Or they'll actually, and I had a case not too long ago, a video of a lady, and she poured some, I forgot what it was. She was walking up down the aisle of Target and poured some liquid in the floor and then got down, and this is all a video. And she just sat down on the floor and just started screaming and she was in pain. So it's like, it's an opportunistic type thing.
Hmm. So it sounds like if you're a business owner, lots of cameras is the sort of thing that can help you.
Yeah, cameras are always a good thing, and just cleaning up the place. I mean, especially in small convenience stores like that, it's just some people, when the opportunity presents itself, they just take advantage of it. And I realize it's difficult for a business owner, but I would suggest try to be as diligent as you can.
And and is most of this kind of, with a small business, is it negatively affecting the business that they're having to pay out of pocket for these incidents, or is it really the insurance company that's really the victim, so to speak?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people think of insurance fraud as a victimless crime, and insurance companies, they got more money than you know the guy that brought Tesla or Elon Musk or
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I'm saying? But the victims are you and me, because insurance company, they're a business, and their responsibility is to do the service, but they have to show a profit or else they wouldn't be in business. So where do they make their money at? From the premiums from us.
Yeah.
So for every, all these fraudulent claims, our premiums go up. And insurance fraud is the second most costly white collar crime in the United States, behind tax evasion. So, and it was ironic because years and years, we've been saying, it's approximately $80 billion a year fraudulent claims in America. Well, that Coalition Against Insurance Fraud just updated that. I found out last week. They're saying it's over $300 billion a
Oh,
year.
wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So that kind of translates to, this probably needs to be updated too, but it's always been estimated $200 to $1,000 per month in increased premiums for us. So it's not a victimless crime at all. It's us. We're the victims in insurance fraud cases.
The victims are just spread out and each paying a small amount as opposed to one victim paying a large amount.
Absolutely. And if you think insurance, that's kind of what it's a pool of money, and that's what insurance is. So that if you have a loss, we can use this pool of money to mitigate your damages, as opposed to you bearing that responsibility all by yourself. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing with premiums.
So are you mostly contacted by the insurance companies then when they think something has happened?
That's where we get the majority of our cases. And we work closely with them, and a lot of the investigators with the insurance industry are like former law enforcement as well. So we always keep a good working relationship. We do get contacted by citizens, disgruntled girlfriends and boyfriends and ex-spouses have been known to call us a time or two. But, by the same token, we're not a hired gun for the insurance industry.
Yeah.
So we work with them in conjunction, but we keep parallel investigations. And, we've prosecuted a number of insurance professionals as well. It's kind of similar to what they got with the funeral home. Agents will, and especially in rural areas, the local agent who you go to church with, and, you go to see at dinner and all that stuff, that's who you deal with. And we've had some agents in the past that will take people's insurance premiums, and what they should be doing is keeping the premium stuff, the insurance, in a separate account from the working account to pay the overhead and all that. Sometimes they'll commingle the two, and that's when they get in trouble. And again, they'll take money and not bind the policy. So somebody, thinks they have insurance on the car or house or whatever, something happens and they're out of luck because they don't have a policy that's been bound.
Yeah. It sounds like it's the trust but verify.
There you go.
Always make sure you're getting billing statements, that you're confirming that your policy is up to date.
And it's people ask me, how can I combat against insurance fraud? Number one thing I tell people is read and understand your policy and what it says. It's always, and I know that's exciting as watching paint dry, but I mean, it's necessary.
Yeah.
And, to know what's in it, what's covered, what's not covered. Basically, I mean, a policy is a policy. Basically, the generic, it's kind of all the same, but then you'll have different states have different rules, different regulations. They'll have exclusions, but, it'll list what is covered, what is not covered, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where if you have a loss and you try to make a claim and it's not covered. For example, most generic like policies, insurance policies, kind of have a limit, and it's pretty low for personal art like jewelry, furs, stuff, personal items like that. Most of them $2,500, $3,000, $5,000, something like that. So if you have a lot of high-end expensive jewelry and you lose it or it's stolen, and if that's $15,000, $20,000, they're only going to pay the limit to what the policy says. So that's quite a big loss.
Yeah.
So by reading your policy and understanding that, and you can get a personal article rider like an addendum to the policy where it covers just those specific items, and so you'll be covered in that instance. But it's always a good idea to understand and make an inventory of things around your house. Especially if you have, expensive high-end items, computers, phones, laptops, stuff like that. Keep an inventory, have the serial numbers, date purchased, keep the receipts, or take a picture of the receipts if you can. And so you have all that documentation, and, in the worst case scenario, and it'll help you out in the long run.
Yeah, the insurance companies are famous for liking documentation.
Oh, yes. And I've got a whole cubicle here full of documentation.
Yeah, it's almost when dealing with insurance companies, we have to change our mindset and think like an insurance company as opposed to thinking like a consumer.
Exactly. And that helps us, as far as our end with the prosecution. The more documents we have, the easier it is for us to prove our cases.
Do you have many cases of fraud conducted by an insurance company?
Not fraud per se, but again, just like the agents taking money and not binding the policies. That's kind of the extent of what we've seen. Now, I know, and then people have called me and say, you need to investigate X, Y, Z insurance company because they're charging me outlandish premiums, but that's not in my bailiwick.
That's a contract dispute, not a criminal matter.
Exactly. And insurance fraud, I mean, it is a contract. It is a contract, so it's contract law that we're kind of enforcing.
Yeah. So is there any other, before we finish up here, any other parting advice you'd have for individuals or businesses with respect to dealing with insurance fraud?
Just a couple of things. And as I mentioned, as far as the homeowner stuff, it's always a good idea, like I said, make inventory and keep a good documentation of all that stuff. One thing we do see, and that's everywhere, all across the country, unscrupulous contractors or public adjusters, they call themselves sometimes. um, storm chasers. When you have a catastrophic event, tornado, hurricane, something like that, always look out for, they go around, knock on your door and say, I can represent you. I know she had damage. I can do this and that, and they go around from catastrophe to catastrophe, and that's what they do. And that's how they make their money. So be very leery about people knocking on your door and soliciting you, as opposed to you reaching out, looking for somebody to, take care of your damage. Always follow up and try to verify everything, and, do a little research and digging into anybody, any contractor, make sure that they're on the up and up, not unscrupulous. For auto insurance, if you find yourself in an accident, just kind of make notes, take pictures of your damage, take pictures of the other vehicle's damage, take notes or take pictures of the driver, because a lot of times we'll have, a little mix up in who was actually driving the car, how many people were in the car. Lots of times we'll have jump-ins too, where, you have an accident and it's one person, and all of a sudden when the insurance claim pops up, there's 5 or 6 people that claim that they were in the car and injured. So take pictures of the surrounding area. If there are any witnesses, people standing around, that can always help you out, if you find yourself in an accident like that, and who else was there and inside the vehicle.
Is it also helpful for having like a dash cam?
Would certainly help, but I mean, that would help if it's right in front of you. But if you hit from the side or the back, and funny, I had one case when I was working down in Virginia Beach, and it was a trooper that I'd worked with for years, and he made a habit, and it was a good thing, just how many passengers were in the vehicle when he got to the scene. And I convicted 2 people who did the same. They were jump-ins. They said that they were injured in an accident, and when I talked to the trooper, he said, no, there's one driver, and that was it. Nobody else was at the scene. So documentation as far as that is always helpful.
So how as a, I'm in a car accident, how do I make sure that the police officer documents, what can I do to help make sure that the police officer documents it on his report?
Just ask him nicely to put a notation in his field notes and document that yourself. As I go around and I talk to, insurance groups, and I talk to civic groups, and I talk to other police departments, and I'm always harping on that. When you work in an accident, I mean, it's an investigation just like any other, right? So, just take a little few minutes just to document that kind of stuff. Don't have to write a whole book and a big, litany of information, just some basic stuff. And it may end up helping us in the long run, well after he's worked the accident.
And I suppose even if I'm trying to remember, I was a witness to a pretty bad accident once, and so I waited around for the police to be there, and they had me write a witness statement. I suppose
Right.
it's good as if they're having you write a witness statement, regardless of what the police officer does, you make sure that you, in your statement, say, the other car had this many people in it, I had this many people in my car.
Exactly.
So they at least
And
can't
that's
say that you're changing your story after the fact.
right. And keep a copy of that. And because, if you can write as soon as possible after the event, that's when you're going to have your freshest memory.
Yeah.
But yeah, just write all those little things down, and just be diligent and make as much information known as possible.
Take a breath, let the emotions cool down.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, sometimes when we go to get called to an accident, there can be a fight in progress by the time we get there. So that's happened a few times before too. So.
And are there the situations where people, if they're staging staging an accident where an actual accident has happened, where they're trying to get the person, well, just give me cash right now and I'll go away. Then they turn around and file an insurance claim later.
That has happened. Not too often, but yeah, absolutely. Don't do that at all. because you're just asking for trouble there and opening yourself up to even more liability. Because I mean, you look at it, if you pay a few dollars or whatever, and then you end up paying again because claims could be made against you, and if it's injuries involved, I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. So always stay away from doing that.
I assume an insurance investigator said, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, why did you give the person money?
Good point. Very good point.
If I totally understand I didn't want to have to deal with my insurance company. So I thought, $200 for a bumper was a good deal.
Well, I mean, and sometimes dealing with insurance companies can be a hassle. I can understand that, but you're better off in the long run and let the process work itself out.
Yep. Well, William, or Tony, if you prefer, I super
Yeah.
appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast.
Sure thing. And I would encourage your viewers, our website here in Virginia is stampoutfraud.com. They have a lot of information there and some extra tips that I've probably forgotten to mention. There's also a national website, Coalition Against Insurance Fraud. I'm not sure if that's .org or .com, but if you Google Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, and that's kind of a national entity that deals with insurance fraud, and you can actually report on both websites in Virginia, but on the national one too, you can actually report, or it gives you the fraud bureaus of each state, so you can report fraud that way as well.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link to both of those in the show notes so people can just click on it and not have to figure out how to type it all in.
All right. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you very much.